I have lived long enough to know the difference between reverence and performance. Churches are full of both. Ours shines on Sundays. The stained glass throws honeyed light across polished pews. The choir breathes like one creature, and Harold squeezes my hand during the Lord's Prayer so the ushers will smile. We are 60 and 62, the dependable couple who never forgets the casserole rota, who tithes on time, who arrives early enough to warm the hymnals with our palms. Harold learned this choreography long ago. He bows his head, but is the tilt of an actor catching his light. He dresses better now, too. A crisp navy suit replaced his woolen standby, and a new cologne, peppery, aspirational, arrived without remark. He calls it stewardship of image. I call it the goose flesh of forewarning. The changes collected like stray bulletins in a pew rack. Late study groups, hushed calls across the kitchen tile, a generosity that bloomed in public and withered in private. He started kissing my forehead at the door. The gesture was tender, performative, and, worst of all, practiced. I could almost see him rehearsing it in the fogged bathroom mirror. I do not frighten easily. I manage the church pantry, the choir library, the accounts for the Women's Guild. Numbers soothe me. Patterns obey. So when the story of my marriage stopped balancing, I did what I always do. I counted. The meetings multiplied, the prayers did not. Receipts appeared from restaurants that require a reservation and a wardrobe you iron twice. He came home later, smelling of candles and lemon, and told me about Corinthians. Betrayal has a tempo. You feel the beat before you know the tune. Something quickened in Harold. He laughed at nothing. He pressed his phone face down on the table as if protecting a sleeping child. He varnished our life with praise we hadn't earned. Liz, you're a rock. Liz, you're my blessing. Words like lace, pretty, porous, insubstantial. On Tuesday nights, our choir practiced under the vaulted ceiling. My alto section favors laughter. The sopranos favor judgment. We start with scales, then gossip. That evening, the gossip perched behind a hymn, a mention of Ruth's new solo, Ruth's new shawl, Ruth's new glow. Ruth is a widow with a bell-like soprano that makes people forgive her for enjoying it. Honeyed light loves her hair. I watched Harold through the corner of my eye while we packed away folders. He lingered near the sopranos, near the honey, near Ruth. The tilt of his head changed, not reverent, not even theatrical, attentive, as if listening for a cue he didn't want to miss. There are truths I refuse to learn all at once. A woman can be righteous and still be slow. I took the music home, baked lemon bars for Wednesday, and decided to wait one more week for the numbers to confess. I slept on my side of the bed and left his untouched, the shape of him cooling into certainty. Morning found me counting again, steps to the mailbox, breaths while the kettle sang, names on the prayer list. When I opened the pantry ledger, my hand steadied. Pages remember. Ink does not lie. If there was a sin in our house, it would leave a record. And I, Elizabeth, would read it. Suspicion, once born, grows like ivy. It threads itself through every silence, every glance, every half-truth a husband brings home with the groceries. I tried to quiet it with prayer. I tried to hush it with lemon tea and psalms. But suspicion doesn't kneel. It lingers. It watches. It sings louder than any hymn. At choir practice the following week, Ruth's laughter struck me first. Her voice has always been strong, but lately it carried an extra shimmer, like a soprano gilded with pride. She wore a new shawl the shade of wine, and when she sang, Harold's head lifted like a moth finding flame. He pretended to fumble with sheet music, but his eyes betrayed the script. The sopranos noticed too. Whispers traveled along the pews, quick as a breeze stirring hymnals. Ruth looks younger these days. She must be taking walks. Or perhaps she's found joy. They laughed, but the sound cut. I sat still, pressing the folder tight, alto lines swimming before me. Numbers still steadied me. I counted the minutes Harold claimed he spent at study groups and how they aligned perfectly with Ruth's choir committees. I logged receipts slipped into the trash, the Capitol Grill, a bistro on Peachtree, places too indulgent for a man who once considered buffet coupons fine dining. I wrote them down in the pantry ledger, neat columns of deceit. If God asked for my accounting, I would hand him the figures. One evening, Harold returned late, shirt scented with rosemary and smoke. He kissed my forehead as always, but his eyes darted to the clock, as if checking how much of the evening he had left to salvage. "Long night?" I asked. "Committee meeting," he answered. His hands trembled as he untied his tie, not with fatigue but with haste, like a man unspooling a lie before it burned him. I kept my smile smooth. My mother taught me long ago, a woman who wishes to uncover truth must never look desperate. The desperate are dismissed. The calm are feared. So I hummed as I stacked the dishwasher and watched his reflection in the kitchen window. He thought he hid well. Men always think so. On Sunday, the pastor preached on faithfulness. I sat in the front pew, Ruth 2 rows behind. The word faithfulness cracked across the sanctuary like thunder, and Harold shifted beside me. His hand squeezed mine too tightly, as if binding me into silence. My rings pressed painfully into my skin, a reminder of vows now worn thin. After the service, Ruth greeted me with a smile, too wide, too rehearsed. "Elizabeth, you look radiant," she said. Her perfume curled around me, floral and smug. I returned the smile even brighter. "So do you, Ruth. Must be the company you've been keeping." She blinked, faltered, then excused herself to gather music sheets. That was confirmation enough. Proof lived not only in ledgers and receipts, but in pauses, in eyes, in silence. And in that silence, my suspicion hardened into certainty. Harold was straying, Ruth was guiding, and I, Elizabeth, was preparing. The truth doesn't always arrive with a shout. Sometimes it comes in small scraps, like receipts left in a jacket pocket or a phone face down on the table. That's how Harold's secret slipped into my hands, not because he confessed, but because he grew careless. It was Thursday evening when I opened the mail basket. Buried under church bulletins was a crumpled slip from the Capitol Grill. 2 dinners, 1 bottle of wine, a date that matched the night Harold claimed to be leading a men's study group. I stared at it until the numbers blurred. 12 years of marriage had taught me his tastes, and Harold never ordered salmon. Ruth did. She always bragged about her healthy habits in choir. Now I saw them printed on paper, charged to our account. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I tucked the receipt inside my pantry ledger, between lists of canned goods and donations. Proof belongs where it can be kept. Later that week, I found more, a scarf with perfume not mine, and text messages that lit his phone late at night. So good to see you. Same time next week. The name was hidden, but the pattern was clear. Suspicion became certainty the night I stayed late after choir. Harold had excused himself for church errands. I watched from the shadows of the parking lot as Ruth climbed into his car. She didn't hesitate. She moved like someone familiar, like someone who belonged. His hand rested on her shoulder as they drove away. That was the moment the air left my lungs. The affair wasn't a whisper anymore. It was real, painted across the headlights of our sedan. My husband and Ruth, the soprano widow, sneaking into the night like teenagers. I wanted to scream, but instead I gripped the hymnal in my bag until my knuckles ached. Sunday morning came, and with it their performance. Harold sang louder than usual, his arm around me as if we were the perfect couple. Ruth stood in the choir loft, her voice sweeter than honey, her smile polite but smug. The congregation saw devotion. I saw theater. After service, Ruth walked toward me. She held out a plate of cookies, the picture of hospitality. "Try one," she said with a grin. I looked her straight in the eye, held the cookie, and broke it in half. "Sweet," I told her, letting the word hang in the air. "Almost too sweet." Her face stiffened, but she said nothing. Harold avoided my eyes the entire ride home. That night, lying awake, I understood two things. First, my marriage was broken in ways no prayer could fix. Second, if Harold thought he could humiliate me quietly, he had underestimated me. Ruth might think she had won, but she had no idea what I was capable of. The truth doesn't always arrive with a shout. Sometimes it comes in small scraps, like receipts left in a jacket pocket or a phone face down on the table. That's how Harold's secret slipped into my hands. Not because he confessed, but because he grew careless. It was Thursday evening when I opened the mail basket. Buried under church bulletins was a crumpled slip from the Capitol Grill. 2 dinners, 1 bottle of wine, a date that matched the night Harold claimed to be leading a men's study group. I stared at it until the numbers blurred. 12 years of marriage had taught me his tastes, and Harold never ordered salmon. Ruth did. She always bragged about her healthy habits in choir. Now I saw them printed on paper, charged to our account. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I tucked the receipt inside my pantry ledger, between lists of canned goods and donations. Proof belongs where it can be kept. Later that week, I found more, a scarf with perfume not mine, and text messages that lit his phone late at night. So good to see you. Same time next week. The name was hidden, but the pattern was clear. Suspicion became certainty the night I stayed late after choir. Harold had excused himself for church errands. I watched from the shadows of the parking lot as Ruth climbed into his car. She didn't hesitate. She moved like someone familiar, like someone who belonged. His hand rested on her shoulder as they drove away. That was the moment the air left my lungs. The affair wasn't a whisper anymore. It was real, painted across the headlights of our sedan. My husband and Ruth, the soprano widow, sneaking into the night like teenagers. I wanted to scream, but instead I gripped the hymnal in my bag until my knuckles ached. Sunday morning came, and with it their performance. Harold sang louder than usual, his arm around me as if we were the perfect couple. Ruth stood in the choir loft, her voice sweeter than honey, her smile polite but smug. The congregation saw devotion. I saw theater. After service, Ruth walked toward me. She held out a plate of cookies, the picture of hospitality. "Try one," she said with a grin. I looked her straight in the eye, held the cookie, and broke it in half. "Sweet," I told her, letting the word hang in the air. "Almost too sweet." Her face stiffened, but she said nothing. Harold avoided my eyes the entire ride home. That night, lying awake, I understood two things. First, my marriage was broken in ways no prayer could fix. Second, if Harold thought he could humiliate me quietly, he had underestimated me. Ruth might think she had won, but she had no idea what I was capable of. Temptation doesn't roar, it whispers. It hides in the quiet moments when no one is looking, when the choir room is empty and the echo of hymns still clings to the walls. That's how it started with Daniel. One evening after rehearsal, the others had already left. I stayed behind to lock the cabinets, pretending to be busy. Daniel lingered too, sorting sheet music. His mother, Ruth, had rushed home early to prepare for a meeting, which we both knew was her code for Harold. That left us alone in the hollow church, the air thick with something unspoken. "You shouldn't be the last one here," he said, walking toward me. His voice was low, almost shy. "It's not safe." I smiled faintly. "I've been closing this place longer than you've been alive. I'll be fine." But the way he looked at me wasn't like a boy talking to a church elder. It was steady, searching. It made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt in years. We carried the last hymnals together. His hand brushed mine. It could have been an accident, but he didn't move it away right away. Neither did I. For a moment, I forgot about age, about vows, about Ruth. All I felt was warmth. "Daniel, Elizabeth, can I tell you something?" I nodded, though I already knew whatever came next would cross a line. "I've never really been close to anyone, not the way I wanted." His face burned red, but he didn't look away. "I guess I'm saying I've never known a woman." I froze. Daniel's voice was trembling, but his eyes were clear. He wasn't confessing out of weakness. He was offering me a truth, a dangerous one. "You don't need to tell me this," I whispered, but my pulse betrayed me. He shook his head. "I wanted you to know, because when you look at me, I don't feel small. I feel seen." The church was silent, but the silence had weight. My mind raced. This was Ruth's son, the boy she adored, the boy she boasted about. To take him would be more than sin. It would be vengeance. And yet, when I looked at him, it didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a chance to feel alive again. I stepped back, putting distance between us. "Daniel, this can't happen." But then I said the words that betrayed me. "At least not here." His breath caught. My own did too. We left separately that night, but something had changed. I knew it. He knew it. Harold was Ruth's secret. Daniel was becoming mine. At home, Harold lay beside me, smelling of cologne that wasn't bought for me, pretending to sleep the sleep of a faithful man. I stared at the ceiling, and in the darkness, I didn't picture his face. I pictured Daniel's. And I understood the truth. Temptation wasn't coming anymore. It had arrived. It happened the following week. Choir rehearsal ended late, rain tapping the stained glass windows as the others hurried home. Ruth left first, fussing over her umbrella, while Harold had already vanished with some excuse about a meeting. I lingered, as I often did, putting away music sheets. And Daniel lingered too. The church was quiet, except for the steady patter of rain on the roof. Daniel carried the last stack of hymnals, his sleeves rolled up, his hair damp with sweat. He looked different that night. Not shy, not nervous, just present, watching me the way a man watches, not a boy. I told myself to leave, to lock the doors and walk into the storm, but I didn't. "You stayed again," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. "So did you," he answered. That was the moment. Two simple sentences, but they stripped away the pretense. We weren't just choir members anymore. We were two people, abandoned by those who should have cherished us, standing too close in a holy place. He stepped forward. "Elizabeth," he whispered, "I think about you all the time." My breath caught. I should have stopped him, but instead I asked, "Do you know what you're saying?" "Yes." His voice didn't shake. "I know exactly what I'm saying." When his hand touched mine, I didn't pull away. His skin was warm, strong, almost trembling. He leaned closer, hesitant but determined, and I let him. His lips brushed mine, soft, searching, new. The kiss was clumsy at first, but honest. It wasn't passion that scared me, it was the truth of it. I hadn't felt wanted in years. For a moment, I saw the organ pipes behind us, tall and gleaming, and I thought of the hymns they carried each week. Now they bore witness to something else entirely, our fall, or maybe our rebirth. When the kiss broke, Daniel's forehead rested against mine. He murmured, "I don't care about the rules, not the church's, not hers. I just care about you." The name hers hung in the air like smoke. Ruth, his mother, Harold, his mistress, the very reason I stood here. Part of me felt sick. Another part felt free. "This is dangerous," I whispered. "So is being alive," he replied. I don't remember who reached first. Maybe it was me, but soon his arms were around me, his lips firmer, his body pressed close. It wasn't gentle anymore. It was urgent, desperate. Rain pounded harder against the glass as if the heavens themselves wanted to drown us. We didn't go further, not yet, but the line had been crossed, burned, and left behind. As I walked to my car, the storm soaking my coat, I knew Harold and Ruth had destroyed something in me, but Daniel had lit something else. At home, Harold snored, dead to the world. I stood in the dark kitchen, rain dripping from my hair, and whispered to myself, "Eye for an eye, flesh for flesh." And for the first time in months, I smiled. Revenge doesn't come in lightning. It comes in planning, quiet, steady, like setting a table before the guests arrive. I had proof of Harold and Ruth. I had fire with Daniel. Now I needed a stage. The answer was simple: a church potluck. Our congregation loved them. Tables lined with casseroles, pies, salads with too much mayonnaise. Laughter echoing in the fellowship hall. It was the kind of event where everyone felt safe, which made it the perfect place to drop a bomb. I suggested the idea at the Women's Guild meeting. "It's been too long since we've shared a meal," I said with a smile. The ladies agreed instantly. Within an hour, Ruth was signed up to bring her famous apple cobbler. Harold volunteered to help with setup. Of course he did. They couldn't resist being near each other, not realizing I was the one pulling the strings. At home, Harold acted as if nothing was wrong. He kissed my forehead, filled the house with empty compliments, even bought me roses. I placed them in a vase, thinking how they would look wilted by the time he faced his shame. Daniel knew nothing of my plan at first. When I told him, his eyes widened. "You're going to expose them? In front of everyone?" "Yes," I said firmly. "They've been meeting in secret, making fools of us both. It's time the truth comes out. He hesitated. And me? I touched his cheek, steadying him. You'll stand with me. That's all I need. He nodded, though I could see the storm inside him. To betray his mother was no small thing, but Ruth had already betrayed him by living a lie. The days leading up to the potluck were a blur of cooking lists, sign-up sheets, and rehearsed smiles. Ruth glided through the halls with her usual glow, humming hymns as if she hadn't gutted two families. Harold grew sharper, more restless. He spent longer in the mirror adjusting his tie, practicing lines I already knew were lies. Daniel and I found our moments in the margins, stacking chairs, folding tables, moving boxes. His hand would brush mine, his eyes linger too long. It was risky, thrilling, dangerous. Each glance reminded me why I was doing this, not just to punish Harold and Ruth, but to take back power. The night before the potluck, I stood in the fellowship hall alone. The tables were bare, the chairs stacked. Soon they would hold laughter, hymns, and food. But I knew what else they would hold. Truth. Raw, messy, undeniable truth. I pictured Ruth's face when she realized her son stood beside me, not her. I pictured Harold's shame, the whispers in the room, the pastor's stunned silence. My stomach twisted, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. For years, I had been the faithful wife, the steady hand, the quiet helper. Tomorrow, I would be something else entirely. Tomorrow, I would be the storm. The fellowship hall smelled of coffee, casseroles, and cobbler. Folding tables groaned under the weight of food. Children ran between chairs. The pastor greeted each family, and laughter rose toward the rafters. To everyone else, it was another Sunday meal. Down and hugged 3 women at once. They both looked so confident, so smug, as if their secret was safe. Daniel arrived late, his shirt tucked carefully, his jaw set. He walked straight to me and didn't drift toward his mother. That alone drew whispers. I felt Ruth notice, but she turned quickly, pretending not to. I kept my plans simple. No screaming, no thrown dishes. Just truth, delivered plainly, in front of everyone. When the pastor asked me to say grace before the meal, I smiled. Perfect. I thanked God for blessings, for food, for community. Then I paused, let the silence build. And I thank God for truth, I said, my voice steady, because truth always comes out, even when people try to bury it. Heads shifted, forks stilled. Ruth glanced at Harold. He looked down. I stepped back, letting the prayer end, and then I did it. I walked toward their table, Daniel right beside me. Harold, I said clearly, you've been keeping company with Ruth every Thursday, not for prayer, not for church work, but for something else. Isn't that right? The room froze. The pastor's mouth opened, but no words came. Ruth's face drained of color. Harold sputtered, Elizabeth, this isn't the place. This is exactly the place, I cut in. You made our church the cover for your sin. You made this fellowship your hiding spot. Why shouldn't everyone know? Ruth tried to rise, but Daniel's voice stopped her. Sit down, Mother. His tone was firm, louder than the whispers now circling the room. All eyes swung to him. You've lied to everyone. And you've lied to me. The shock that crossed her face was almost satisfying enough. Almost. Harold reached for my arm. "Please, let's talk about this privately." "No," my voice rang out, sharp and final. "You had no problem humiliating me in secret. You'll face it in the open." Ruth's hands shook against the table. "Daniel, don't do this. Not here." Daniel looked at me, then at her. "I'm done protecting lies." The whispers grew louder. Chairs scraped. People leaned closer. For once, Ruth had no song to cover her. Harold had no sermon to hide behind. They sat exposed, two sinners, stripped of their masks, while the church family they had fooled stared at them with wide eyes. I took Daniel's hand in mine, not caring who saw. "Now," I said quietly, "everyone knows." And the silence that followed was heavier than any hymn. After the potluck, the church felt different. People avoided Harold and Ruth in the halls, their smiles forced, their greetings clipped. The whispers never stopped. Some pitied me, some cheered me, but all of them agreed the secret was dead. For Ruth, it was worse. Her place in the choir shrank. Her once bright voice seemed quieter, unsure, and Daniel, her son, her pride, no longer stood beside her. He walked with me instead. That was the wound she could not hide. It didn't take long before she cornered him. I was stacking hymnals in the choir room when I heard them, Ruth's voice sharp and trembling. "Daniel, please, don't do this to me." Daniel answered calmly, "I didn't do anything, Mother. You did." "You don't understand," she pressed, stepping closer. "Your father died young. I was lonely. Harold, he made me feel alive again. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." I froze by the doorway, my hand resting on the hymnal stack. This wasn't my scene, it was theirs, but I couldn't walk away. Daniel's voice rose, the first time I'd ever heard true anger from him. "You didn't mean to hurt anyone? You hurt me. You lied to me every time you said you were at a church meeting. You told me honesty mattered, that reputation mattered, and then you do this?" Ruth's words broke apart. "I'm still your mother." "Yes," he said firmly, "and that's why it's worse." There was silence, broken only by the creak of pew wood. Then Ruth tried again, softer this time. "Daniel, you're confused. You're letting Elizabeth use you. She's angry, and she's pulling you into her revenge. You don't really want this. Not her." That was the moment my breath caught. Would he deny me, push me away to protect himself? But Daniel's answer was steady. "I'm not confused. I know what I want. And it's not lies. Not anymore." Ruth's voice cracked. "She's old enough to be your mother." "And you are old enough to know better," Daniel said. The words cut through the room like a blade. Ruth gasped as if struck. I couldn't see her face, but I imagined the tears welling, the fury burning behind her eyes. Then Daniel lowered his voice. "I love you, Mother, but I can't stand beside you when you live like this, not when you've broken every promise you made to me." The sound of her sobbing filled the room, raw and angry, like a hymn gone off key. I pressed the hymnals tighter to my chest, guilt and triumph wrestling inside me. Ruth had lost Harold in the open. Now she was losing Daniel in the shadows. When I finally stepped into view, Daniel didn't flinch. He looked at me, steady, calm. Ruth turned, her eyes red, her face hard. "This isn't over," she whispered. But in her voice, I heard something new. Not power, not pride, fear. The church didn't recover quickly. Our potluck had been more than a meal. It had been a battlefield, and the echoes of that day spread through every hymn, every handshake, every whispered prayer. Some people sided with me. Elizabeth was right to speak out, they said. Better to face sin in the light than let it rot in secret. They greeted me with warm smiles, with casseroles on my doorstep, with whispered encouragement after service. Others thought I had gone too far. "She humiliated Harold in public," they muttered. "She dragged Ruth through the mud. Couldn't it have been handled quietly?" Those were the ones who avoided me in the hall, their nods stiff, their voices clipped. But the harshest judgment fell not on me, it fell on Ruth and Harold. Harold tried to keep attending services, but every time he stood to sing, the congregation's eyes cut him down. His once booming voice grew weaker each week until he simply stopped coming. He told people he was busy with work. Everyone knew better. Ruth clung to the choir at first. Her soprano still soared, but without the admiration it once carried. People shifted uncomfortably when she sang, as if her voice itself had turned false. Whispers followed her like shadows. Finally, she stopped showing up too. The pastor called for forgiveness from the pulpit. He preached about grace, about second chances, but even his words couldn't erase what had been seen. The church was a house of God, yes, but it was also a house of memory, and memory has a long reach. For Daniel, the fallout was brutal. People didn't know what to make of him. Some pitied him, others judged him, but all of them watched him. He stood beside me anyway. His choice was clear, even if it cost him friends, even if it broke his mother's heart. One Sunday after service, an older woman stopped me in the parking lot. Her eyes were sharp, her tone disapproving. "Elizabeth, don't you think you've stirred enough trouble?" I met her gaze without flinching. "Truth stirs trouble all on its own. I just refuse to keep it quiet." She pursed her lips, but said nothing more. She knew I was right. At home, Harold moved like a ghost. He still pretended nothing had changed, but the walls between us were taller than any sermon could tear down. I spoke little, he spoke less, and silence became our only language. Meanwhile, Daniel's presence became my anchor. When he looked at me, he didn't see scandal. He saw someone who had refused to be broken. His loyalty gave me strength, even as the church split into camps. I knew whispers would follow us. I knew people would call me cruel, reckless, even sinful. But as I watched Ruth disappear into the shadows and Harold shrink into shame, I felt no regret. The congregation was torn, but so was I. And sometimes, tearing is the only way to let the truth breathe. At first, Daniel was only part of my revenge, a way to take from Ruth what she had taken from me. But revenge has a way of turning into something else when you spend enough time with it. What began as fire soon became warmth. We met quietly, always careful, always cautious. Sometimes in the church library after everyone had left, sometimes at the park where the old oak trees bent low enough to give us shade and cover. What I thought would be stolen moments started to feel like a new life. He listened. That was what undid me most. For years, Harold had stopped hearing me. My words brushed off like dust. But Daniel leaned in, asked questions, remembered every detail. He noticed when my hand shook as I poured tea, when my laugh caught in my throat. He noticed me. One evening, he showed me his sketchbook, not drawings of buildings or still life, but faces. His mother, the choir, even me. My own face stared back at me from the page, softer, younger than I felt. "I drew you from memory," he said, his voice quiet, "because you stay with me even when you're not here." I wanted to tell him to stop, that this was dangerous, foolish, sinful, but the truth was I wanted to believe him, and in that moment I did. At home, Harold grew colder. He still pretended at kindness, roses, forehead kisses, small gifts, but his effort rang hollow. I compared every touch, every word to Daniel's, and Harold always came up short. I realized then how empty my marriage had become long before Ruth. The affair hadn't killed it, it had only exposed the bones. One night, as Daniel walked me to my car after rehearsal, rain began to fall. We stood under the awning, close enough to feel each other's breath. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "Us." I searched his face. He looked so young, yet so certain. "I regret that it had to start this way," I admitted, "but I don't regret you." His hand found mine, warm despite the rain. "Then don't let go," he whispered. I didn't. The lines blurred after that. It was no longer just revenge. It was comfort. It was tenderness. It was love in the quiet spaces we built together. Ruth's betrayal and Harold's lies had pushed us together, but what held us there was something stronger. I knew what the church would say if they found out. I knew what people would whisper, the names they would call me. But when Daniel looked at me with that steady gaze, none of it mattered. For the first time in years, I felt alive, not as someone's wife or someone's victim, but as a woman still capable of being wanted. And I began to wonder if God's judgment would be as harsh as men's, or if he too could see the difference between sin and salvation. 8 months passed. Enough time for rumors to settle, enough time for lives to rearrange. Harold left the church first. He claimed he needed a fresh start, but everyone knew he couldn't face the stares, the whispers, the weight of his own shame. He moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. We spoke only through lawyers after that. Ruth clung longer. For weeks she forced herself into the choir loft, lifting her soprano like a shield, but the glow was gone. People shifted in their seats when she sang, their eyes colder than the notes she held. Eventually, she stopped coming too. One day her pew sat empty, and it stayed that way. And Daniel? He stayed. Not with Ruth, not with Harold, but with me. At first it was cautious, meetings in quiet corners, walks through empty parks, late-night calls where we whispered like teenagers. But slowly, we stopped hiding from ourselves. He cooked dinner in my kitchen. He left books on my table. He filled the silence Harold had left behind, not with lies, but with life. It wasn't easy. The church was split. Some called me brave. Others called me shameless. There were those who said I had sinned twice, once by exposing Harold, and once by holding Daniel's hand. But their voices mattered less with each passing day. I had lived 60 years by other people's rules. I wasn't about to waste what was left bowing to their judgment. One night, Daniel asked me, "Do you ever wonder if this is wrong?" I thought hard before answering. All my life, I've been told what's right and wrong. But the people who preach those lessons were the same ones sneaking into shadows. If love feels more honest than lies, then maybe the rules need changing, not us. He nodded, and I saw peace settle in him. The boy who once bent under Ruth's shadow was becoming his own man. And strangely, in him, I found my freedom too. Now, when I sit in the pew on Sundays, I no longer bow my head for show. I bow it because I choose to. The whispers still circle, but they no longer cut me. They remind me that truth is rarely clean. It is jagged, messy, scandalous, and yet it is real. Harold lost his mask. Ruth lost her son. I lost my old life. But what I gained was something I never expected. Love that came after fire. Love that was not neat or approved, but love that made me feel alive. At night, when the house is quiet, I still pray. Not for forgiveness, not for pity. I pray with gratitude for the storm that tore my marriage apart, for the scandal that stripped the lies away, for Daniel, whose hand in mine feels less like sin and more like salvation. If heaven judges me, so be it. Down here, I have already found my peace.